Greetings, friends, and mostly enemies. Today, we got a book review for you, and it's from a debut independent author, so I am very happy to announce that it is of good quality and quite enjoyable. But not to give away too much in the intro, let's talk about it. House of Rahilius, or Rahilius. I'm not quite sure how AJ wants that pronounced, but yeah, book one of the Sword Nation saga is good. I quite enjoyed it. Actually, I just realized I kind of need to read you the blurb. So, because this is a debut and there isn't much information online about the book yet because it's not available even for pre-order yet, I'm going to read you the blurb, and in this whole review, we're going to avoid spoilers of any kind. I know in a lot of my reviews I kind of give spoilers, and in some of my interviews I do too. But I'm going to try to avoid spoilers on this because this is an advanced reader copy. I actually have the first physical copy in existence, which is super cool and something of an honor. So thank you, AJ. And this is my first physical arc ever. So like this is kind of a big deal for me. Like I wish it was signed. That's literally the only thing that could make this more cool for me. Anyways, Earth had enough and turned against them, ravaging society with hunger, plague, and endless disaster. There were 3 planets in the Diamond Galaxy capable of sustaining human life, and the inhabitants of each were agreeable to it by their own terms. Delu carried off the young, Grayus harvested the talent, and Kaora became home to the wealthy. 17-year-old Lincoln Wolf is set to marry the princess when his world is turned upside down. A ship from the neighboring planet Kaora arrives with passengers fleeing enslavement by the Prime Minister and infamous pirate Rahilius. When Rahilius' demands for the return of the stolen vessel are ignored, he kills the ruler of Gree, kidnaps the princess, and declares war on Grayus. Lincoln learns the necessary skills to kill Rahilius, while the princess sheds propriety and uses her hidden talents to fight for her own survival. Meanwhile, a southern city rebel seeks to spark a revolution and free the enslaved people of Kaora. One hero, one warrior, one rebel. 3 paths converge to start one holy war against the Kaoran Empire. But Rahilius is more than he seems, and underestimating him will come at a great cost. Part 2. So, if that sounded good, that's because it is good. The book is pretty good. So, as is my way of doing things around these parts, I'm going to tell you what I like about the book, where I enjoyed it, and then we'll move on to some of the things that needed some work or just weren't my cup of tea at the end, and then we'll finish it off with, my final notes. So one of the things right off the bat that's worth mentioning is there's heavy themes of racism and classism woven into the narrative. And it's not hitting you over the head with the woke staff. I mean, it makes sense in the context of the story. Kind of in the same vein as District 9, where the classism and the apartheid state is kind of a central theme. And so if you don't like stories like that, where that's one of the major themes and the story, I won't say exists to get a message across, but is absolutely trying to get a message across. If you don't like stories like that, this book might not be for you. That being said, it addresses them tactfully and with some serious, sound arguments. And it's in the context of this new sci-fi world with these circumstances and events built up around it. And it creates unique context to analyze the issues in. Or maybe not unique, but you know, individual circumstances to analyze these themes in the context of. So that's one point in the favor of the book, in my opinion, because those are always things that when in proper context and when relevant, merit discussion. Now, in that same vein, the narrative itself, outside of those two major themes in the narrative itself is well structured. The pacing is very good. Very good. In fact, it's probably the strongest part of the narrative. The structure of the narrative is good. The rise and fall of action is good. There's quite a bit of prep time. A very meaty section of the novel is first build to the inciting incident. That's less meaty, but then the prep time to get to the climax is a pretty decent chunk of the novel. It's 400 pages, and between those two things, we're well over halfway through the novel. I think we only get to the climax of the book in the last 100 or so pages. So only 1/4 of the book can really be considered action. Now, in regards to the style the narrative is communicated in, AJ's style is clear. She's a good communicator, but her style lacks flair. And I'm not sure if that's just her style or if that's a deliberate choice. But because of the serious themes in the book and because of the serious way the narrative is presented, it really feels deliberate. It feels like any kind of flair, bombacity, anything like that, pizzazz, is left out on purpose to lend this serious atmosphere to the story. And so it's consistent in its theming and the way it addresses itself. And so that's a creative choice. And you got to respect the creative choice and the consistency and the proper execution. However, as a reader, I like a little bit of pizzazz. I like a little bit of flair, a little bit of melodrama every now and then. So while I respect and recognize the creative choice, in my opinion, the writing did suffer a little bit in some key instances, some key sections where it's like, oh man, that was the perfect place to be a little bit melodramatic and ridiculous. That's just how I feel. Moving on past the narrative, the characters. The characters are good. However, what I said about the writing lacking flair, unfortunately, one of the side effects of that was characterization could be better, and character development could be better. They're good, don't get me wrong. You have a distinct sense of who each character is. You know what their personalities are. You know what their beliefs are. You know who the character is. And all of the important characters have an arc. So, not bad by any stretch. But there's room to improve. The characters could have been more alive. They could have definitely felt more fleshed out, more real, if there had been a little bit more embellishment and a little more colorful language surrounding them. And so that's something that AJ can definitely work on in the future. That would be one of my places where I focused my attention if I was AJ. And in fact, when I gave AJ my reader's notes, because she asked me for, hey, let me know what you think. And so I gave her my raw notes from reading the book as a kind of a alpha, well, not even an alpha, beta reader, because it's already, obviously mostly done. So I gave her my beta reading notes, and that was in there. That being said, she's obviously doing something right, because one of my favorite characters, my favorite character, was actually a side character by the name of Penny. Penny has two huge things that she contributes to the plot, and she doesn't even spend that much time on page. And yet I have a very good sense of who she is, what she believes in, and what kind of person she is. And so, obviously AJ's doing something right if a side character that didn't even get that much page time is having that much of an impact on the reader. So, and then past AJ, I really enjoyed Lincoln. Lincoln is a pretty good male protagonist. He's a little bit cliche in some ways. I mean, Lincoln Wolf. No offense, AJ, but a little on the nose. Come on. like that name screams, I'm the protagonist. Which I guess isn't a bad thing. Monkey D. Luffy screams, I'm the protagonist. Vladimir Dracul screams, I'm the protagonist. Harry Potter, well, not so much that one, does it? But The Boy Who Lived certainly screams, I'm the protagonist. Now, one thing in Lincoln's favor is he has something unique going for him. I think this is an important thing to discuss because it affects a lot of people in real life, and it's not really talked about very much in fiction as far as I've seen. Maybe you read a lot of fiction where protagonists or side characters have this particular coping mechanism, but I haven't read those books. And so it was really cool for me, especially knowing many people in my life who suffered from this coping mechanism. It's very cool to see a protagonist with this coping mechanism. Hypersexuality. Lincoln suffered a massive trauma in his childhood. I'm not going to spoil, but like many good protagonists, he suffered a tremendously damaging trauma in his childhood. And through the years, the way he coped with it was hypersexuality. He was a man slut. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. He was a man whore. Banged half the girls in school. And that's a coping mechanism that gets a lot of misunderstanding, misconception, and lack of empathy around it. It's just as much a coping mechanism as alcoholism, drug addiction, seclusion, anorexia, any coping mechanism you can think of that's the way that person is improperly dealing with the pain inside. It's just as serious as any of them. And a lot of people are afflicted with it. I especially notice in my own personal life, I don't know if there's any science to back this up, but it really seems like people who have suffered sexual traumas suffer from the coping mechanism of hypersexuality. That's not Lincoln's, by the way. I just want to make that clear. That's not his, but so it merits talking about, and it's addressed in this book tactfully and with a sense of empathy and a sense of understanding. And he's not portrayed as being this super cool, awesome dude for getting laid all the time by a bunch of girls. It's portrayed as being somewhat sad and depressing that's the only way he can cope. And I really appreciate that it's taken seriously, because it's something that needs to be talked about. So, kudos. And then the last thing I'm going to mention in terms of things that are kind of cool that I like about the book is the way the narrative is told and the way it feels when you're reading it. It kind of feels like you're sitting around a campfire with an old, wise storyteller, and he's telling you an important legend. And because of the way he's telling the story, it feels like what's really important in the legend are the events and not so much the characters. The way the writing is, the way the prose flow, and the way it sounds in your head, and the word choices, and the way events are portrayed, and the way the characters are portrayed, it definitely feels like the events are what's important. What's going on is what's important. The characters just so happen to be, if not coincidental, as they were the ones alive at the time, certainly feel like it's kind of their fate. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like they made their own fate. It's that they were fated to be in this slot. And sometimes it's really nice to have a distinct feeling that the protagonist you're reading is the one making their own fate. I definitely like books like that. My favorite books feel like that. So, do with that opinion about the writing as you will. Yeah. Next, we're going to move to the things that I thought the book could definitely work on. And these are primarily issues because the book is sci-fi. If the book was fantasy, these wouldn't be a problem, or they'd at least be less problematic. But because the book is sci-fi, and definitely portrays itself as sci-fi, these have to be talked about. So there are some logical issues with the world building. We're in the far future. Earth is deteriorated to the hellish state that it's depicted in the blurb, and that so many people these days seem to think it's going to end up in, regardless of how you feel about that or not. That's the way the book is saying Earth is going to be. We are not given an exact year, but it's described as being quite bad. So we're in the far future, and we're in an intersolar society, because all these planets have ships that go from habitable planet to habitable planet, and these habitable planets are not in our solar system. So obviously we are in an intersolar community / society. And one of the main modes of combat is, I mean, it's not a lightsaber. The weapon, functionally, it kind of works like a lightsaber in terms of what it does, but it's not. Its design is not like a lightsaber. But that's the weapon of choice for the warriors on the planet of Gree. And the problem with that is projectile weaponry is dominant in Earth warfare for a reason. It's super effective. Projectile weaponry is devastating. When the Chinese discovered gunpowder, they instantly weaponized it and instantly gained superiority over their enemies. It became a devastating force on the battlefield like that. Check out, I think the name for them is fire sticks. I think that was the first Chinese weapon that used gunpowder. It was fire sticks or thunder sticks or something like that. Anyways, terrified. Absolutely terrified. And my point is, projectile weaponry has only become more devastating since then. And now we're starting to get good with rail guns, which fire magnetically propelled projectiles at, the speed of sound and shit like that. It's terrifying what these things can do. So there's no reason to believe that a hyper-advanced society capable of interstellar travel with ultra-advanced medicine and capable of creating a lightsaber-like weapon would neglect projectile weaponry. Or if they did, you'd best believe they would have some kick-ass personal shields that allowed them to ignore projectile weaponry so that they could get close with their melee weapons. And we do not see any such shields in the book. And so, that's a logical hole. That's a logical error, whatever you want to call it. It's not good world building, in my opinion. And I said that to the author, and I'm going to say it here because it's true. If you have a very futuristic world setting like this, so you've built up a super futuristic high-tech society like this, you have to explain why projectiles went the way of the dinosaur and went extinct. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's projectile weapons in the book, but they are by no means a primary source of violence. And so it's highly questionable why that is. And it hasn't been talked about. So the author very well may offer a explanation in the future. It could very well be explained away and be sealed up like that, and my criticism will be bunk. But for now, it's a logical hole, and it was something I instantly noticed, because you have these great warriors on this planet Gree. They're depicted as being the greatest warriors in the galaxy, and as far as I can tell, they're not even trained in projectile weapons. Are you kidding me? Then the second issue with the world building that I saw was humans went to these 3 planets because Earth was shit-canned, and humans discovered these societies on their own. These societies didn't come to Earth and make the offer. Humans discovered them. And so if humans are at a stage where we can travel past our solar system and get to other habitable worlds, we'd keep exploring. humans are explorers by nature. That's like one of our favorite things to do. And the only reason we haven't explored more is because of the overwhelming complications and costs that come with long distance space travel. Our technology just hasn't gotten there yet. Hopefully it does within my lifetime. That would be super cool. Anyways, point is that if we could travel that far, we would. And there would either be a world that was habitable or within reasonable possibility of being terraformed. And it's likely that if our technology advanced that far, Mars could be successfully terraformed. You know, you lug a few asteroids to add mass to Mars, suddenly it's damn near Earth gravity. Lugging all the asteroids at it would melt the ice caps on Mars and probably give it an atmosphere. And if it had more gravity, it would hold the atmosphere to it. All kinds of shit. So, point is, if we were that far ahead, we'd be able to terraform a planet to call home. And so, the idea that humans have just moved to these other three societies, planets, and are basically couch surfing, interstellar couch surfing, is it's just not quite believable, especially when there's this level of technology. So that's a logical hole. And again, that could probably be explained away, but this one not so easily. That would take a much more in-depth and well thought out explanation. And it was touched on in the book. So the explanation would have to be logically and factually consistent with what's already been written. And so that one's going to be a little bit harder to explain away. But AJ might be up for the challenge. She seems to be a pretty good reader, or seems to be a pretty good author. So I'm curious to see if it gets addressed. And then the final weakness in this book, in my opinion, this is entirely a matter of opinion. This is 100% subjective, but it's a weakness for me. The lack of humor. I fucking love a good laugh. And I'm sure you can tell by watching my content, laughter is like one of the things I value in life more than anything. It's like love, laughter. Those are my priorities. And there's only one or two funny lines in the book. And there was quite a few really, really good opportunities for comic relief. There was this one scene where Lincoln could have been dropped on his ass and wasn't. It would have been hilarious if he was, but he was gently set down, and I was like, man, why wasn't he just dropped on his ass? That would have been so funny. Nope. And so, because of that, because laughter is the caramel on my brownie, it is the cherry on my sundae, it is the butter on my biscuit, and there's none of it, the book loses some points for me. So, overall, that's the meat of what I have to say. If you want to get some more details, some more concise and yet in-depth analysis, you can always check out my Goodreads, where the review will be posted when the book is uploaded to Goodreads. Probably the same for Amazon, assuming the author puts it up for sale on Amazon, which if you're a modern day author, you put your book for sale on Amazon, so I'm sure it will be. And so, yeah, good book. 7 out of 10. Thoroughly enjoyed it. If you like dystopian, if you like strong female leads, if you like complex love dynamics, check it out. It's a good book. I'm gonna buy the sequel. Unless she sends me the sequel as an arc, which would be sweet. So, I highly recommend it. Go check it out. The author is AJ Ross. Check out her links in the description, and stay tuned. I'm going to have one more video up for you today, and it's going to be something a little bit different. So, I hope you like it. today we got a book review for you, and I'm actually